Marcus, man, thanks for joining us, dude. I know you're a busy man. You're releasing all your rankings over the coming few weeks. I know you're have some other things planned as well. So I appreciate taking the time, dude. This has been fun. It's been fun seeing you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you having me on. It's good to see your face again. It was pre-COVID down in Mobile when I last saw you, getting twisted at Veets.
Oh, dude, man, there's the pre-COVID Senior Bowl was that was an interesting one. I actually missed half of the practice because Bill Belichick decided to stand on the bleacher in front of me, and you're not going to tell Bill Belichick to fucking move. Excuse me, greatest coach of all time. The PR man is trying to watch the fourth string receiver. Can you please move? But so the podcast I've been doing up in Smoke Football Podcast, I've been talking a lot about kind of like the process of going through and evaluating teams and players. You're a pretty ballsy dude. You put out like hour-long podcasts and videos on each team. Most analysts put out like 3 minutes of content on teams that they're not super certain about, and you're out here just going an hour on like the 32nd ranked team. So, and I noticed that you've gotten longer over the course of your career. It started like at 15 minutes, 10 minutes. Because back in the day when I used to work in before pre-COVID, back in the city, I would get through like 3 of your videos by the time I got home. Now I'm starting one and getting home, and it's still not done yet. So, like, well, what went into the decision to make it longer? Did you just really enjoy talking to the Jaguars for an hour, or was it like, I need to do this?
Well, I do enjoy it. It all kind of started back when I was a much more like Madden centric channel, and I don't know. I think I've just really developed my lingo and my ability to just kind of keep talking and not stop. And back in the day, like I don't know, I have like 30 plus different cuts out of it. And just, I would take forever at throwing it together, and I would take something I said here out, and I would be really focused on, we got to keep this at 20, 25 minutes. Now I'm much more like, let's just sit down, let's talk. If it takes 90 minutes, it takes 90 minutes. And fortunately enough, like people want to hear me talk about that for 90 minutes, which also helps. So yeah, I think it's mostly just as I've spent more time like growing my knowledge base, I think I'm just more comfortable talking for that long.
Well, I think that's very impressive, because you see a lot of guys that like ESPN analysts. And granted, they only have a certain amount of time within a segment to talk about people. But they only put out like a little bit of content. Even guys that do deeper dives, like even like PFF, which I was employed at one time. You're still with PFF, right? You're still doing stuff with them?
Part-time, yep.
Yeah, part-time. So like even they don't put out a ton of content per team. Like it's about 15 minutes per team. To go out there and just be like, because everyone's keeping receipts these days. Yeah, the Chargers have been slamming Seth Galina for like 2 years, and he put out like 30 seconds of content on Herbert, and you're putting out a full hour. So like,
well, look, there's plenty of Herbert hate to go around. If the Chargers want to put me up on their site with my terrible Justin Herbert take, I mean,
listen, as long as the Twitter handle's there, and the link to the channel, yeah, man, bury them all you want.
Poor Seth.
Dude, I used the first case I had on the podcast, and just. Dude, he's like one of the coolest people, and just watching him get dunked on is because he takes it so well. Like the dunking, it's almost funnier when he gets dunked on. He's like, yeah, it is what it is. It's fine. But so when you're going through these teams, obviously I know you can evaluate players. You've been doing draft evaluations for a while, and obviously you have your own roster that you put on Madden, which it has to be the most downloaded thing on the community at this point every season. And you go through all of those guys, which is insane. So obviously your ability to evaluate players is not questioned right now. We'll see if you make another Herbert fuck up. But until then, it's not questioned. But how do you take those player evals and turn into team evals?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a miracle that after Herbert got, I think, a 65 from me in his rookie roster, it's a miracle people still download it. But
Make it more challenging. I get it.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that question there? Yeah, Herbert just lives rent free in my mind, man. It's just
me too. I get it. I was saying, like, how do you, when you're evaluating teams, obviously you already have your player evals. How do you take those, it's not 53 because the 52nd player doesn't really matter, but like your top 35 players from a team, how do you put that all together and decide
sure.
these 35 are better than these 35? Obviously, just deciding 1 through 7, 1 from 17, probably not that big of a deal, but deciding like who's 17, who's 16. What in your evaluation process is giving a team an edge over the other?
No, that's a great question. I'm glad I finally get to open up about it. So I actually have a spreadsheet, and I'm opening it up right now. And I've had some talks with some different people that are connected, just kind of like, what should the splits be? Mm-hmm. So I actually do go through, and I'll go and I provide a grade. And it's kind of, it's all evolved from what was originally literally just my Madden ratings. Like 4 years ago when I did these deep dive team rankings, I would literally just take whatever my Madden rating was. I've evolved beyond just Madden, and there's faults with the actual ratings in Madden that I come up with my own number now. But yeah, so like right now I provide a grade for the quarterback, the weapons, which I used to do wide receiver, tight end, and split them up like that. Now I just rank the weapons all together. Pass block, run game coordinator, pass game coordinator, running back, run blocking. And this year I added a quarterback run multiplier that's a booster to the run game. And that's just offense. Defense has a little bit less: pass rush, linebacker coverage, DB coverage, D-line run defense, linebacker run defense, DB run defense. So I went through and provided a grade for each of those. And now I have a formula that helps me spit out. And I spent a lot of time with this formula trying to figure out a good split for that. And it's obviously not perfect, but basically I come up with a passing game ranking, which right now is 42% quarterback, 27% weapons, 13% pass block, that number's actually come down for me over the last few years, and 18% coordinator. Run game is 40% run blocking, 35% running back, and 25% run game coordinator. And then it's 70-30 as far as passing game, run game, to give me your full offensive ranking. So
I love that it's a spreadsheet, because as a nerd myself, that's how I do all my stuff as well. It's all on an Excel sheet somewhere.
Exactly. So I sit down. It took me about 2 days just kind of filling it all in and really trying to take my time and bounce it off of some people as well, just to open up feedback, like any teams stand out too high, too low, and then I'll take a second look at it. But it's all there. It's all put together, and that's how you get the total rankings.
Awesome. I think that's great. I love that you actually have like a number value for everything. It's not just kind of like willy-nilly, like, oh, it's this dude. Touching on pass blocking real quick, because you kind of mentioned how it's been going down, and it's been the news recently with Joe Burrow on the podcast, talking about how his not all sacks are created equal, and how his third down sacks like really don't matter. And I think Brett Coleman actually did a video that came out. Well, today is Wednesday, so I think not either yesterday or today, talking about second down sacks being way more important to offenses than third down sacks, which makes sense. Because if a third down sack happens, you're punting. If you have a second down sack, that essentially kills your drive. Like the drive is over at that point. And then also PFF's studies about how quarterbacks have more influence over their sack rate than blockers do most of the time. So have you been kind of affecting that as well? Like, because even if you have the best pass blockers in the world, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray are always going to have more pressures than Tom Brady. Even if you give them an all-pro line and Tom Brady an average line, they're just always going to be pressured more just because of their style of play than Brady. So have you seen that over the course of like a few years you've been doing this?
I would say that's 80% of why they've been going down for me, is just the more I watch, the more you see like, dude, it doesn't freaking matter who Tom Brady's O-line is sometime, because it's not just time to throw, which is obviously so important, but it's how you navigate the pocket as well. Like just watching certain teams like the Bears I just did, there's so many times where like there's a pocket there. And right. Justin Fields he's not navigating it the way a Tom Brady would. So it's like, that's super important. And I just think we're also seeing a rise in the importance of weapons. So you have to steal from something. I'm not going to steal from quarterback. Right. I think play calling is also extremely important right now. So I think it's just a number of factors have kind of reduced the importance of pass protection. The last little note there, I think, would be, I think a lot of these teams, especially when you look at like half the league in these kind of Shanahan style offenses now, this play action is helping these guys so much with the moving pockets and moving defensive linemen. And you're getting less true pass sets. You're seeing the scheme protect a lot of these offensive linemen as well. So there's a huge number of variables for sure that have made me value pass blocking a little bit less.
Touching on play action, because I actually want to go about that as well, because there was a conversation on Twitter. I saw, I think it was like Taj and Eric were having about it, talked about it, how the Colts linebackers really don't react to play action at all. Like they just don't bite on play action. As teams start doing that, because I would imagine that's probably the route we're going to end up going with. Play action being so important in the NFL, where it's making average quarterbacks good and good ones great. Will that re-add importance to the run game? Because the linebacker flow really does impact the run game, right? If the run game goes from averaging 4 yards to 5 yards, does it? I don't know if it'll ever be equal to passing. I think the yard per attempt across the league is like almost 7, like 6.7. So it'd still be a full yard and a half below. But if you're taking essentially the entire second level of the defense out of the run game, do you see it starting to even out a bit more from maybe not 70-30 to maybe more 60-40 in the near future?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting, like this year and the next couple of years, it's going to be a really interesting turning point. It's always been zig when the rest of the league zags, and the teams that are ahead of the curve, oftentimes go as far as the Super Bowl. So we've seen this kind of play action league. The quarters heavy, too high league has kind of taken over the last couple of years. But what happens if San Francisco goes on a run this year, or maybe Green Bay or Baltimore, one of these teams that I do think is really buying into the run game right now? And that could absolutely cause a return to 12 personnel and base defense. I mean, that might be an extreme, but I do think it's fascinating that there is certainly, I think, an opportunity for the reason you described. Just from a personnel standpoint, teams are living in nickel 60-70% of the time. Additionally, something that I've kind of picked up on the last couple of years that I'm interested to see how that plays out is how bad the interior defensive line talent entering the league has been the last couple of years.
So bad.
It's been horrid. You're talking about at max 4 players from a draft class that are like even competent run defenders. And if some of these, the Al Woods of the world, the Akeem Hicks of the world, the competent 30-year-old run defenders, as they get aged out, what if these guys entering the league really do continue to suck? And you're now left with teams not sending the linebackers after the run without, Grover Stewart and DeForest Buckner up front,
right,
to defend the run. You could totally see, teams like especially Baltimore right now. I mean, their entire draft was like, we're going 13 personnel. We're going to try and just run it down people's throats all day. So I think it's definitely something to at least keep an eye on. I mean, running the ball is just so much harder than passing the ball, but
Right.
It's definitely at a potential turning point.
Yeah, and I always think back to the not the Rams run this year, but the Rams run with Goff a couple years ago, where Todd Gurley was the MVP for like a hot 30 seconds before people like wised up and realized that he was just not that good. Um, but like Sean McVay was running Todd Gurley into a light box like 60% of his carries, which is really what you want to do, right? You want to get that numbers advantage. With teams going to, like I said, more too high personnel, which is more conducive to running, and you keep your linebackers there, even if your linemen are decent run defenders, right? Now that affects their pass rushing because they have to hold the gap for a second longer than they might prior when they knew they had linebacker help. It does seem like if this continues, now listen, teams have to adopt the Colts method of not, setting your linebackers for play action. But if that does continue, we could see almost like not a total reset, but a reset with a run game. Where having a run game is relatively important. I still don't think it goes back to a running back being valuable because it's not. It's still the offensive line. But I also think with the add of mobile quarterbacks, where if you got a 6-person box, right, and you're facing 11 personnel, you got 6 blockers when you include the tight end, and now you also have 2 runners with the back and the quarterback. That's a lot to defend for only 4 linemen.
Yeah,
I think that could be a massive shift. Again, if teams decide to go away, stop biting the play.
You're just trying to get people to bet on the 49ers to win the Super Bowl, aren't you?
No, absolutely not. Listen,
Kyle Shanahan with a running quarterback is I think every defensive coordinator's nightmare.
Oh well, the only good thing about if Kyle Shanahan plays Trey Lance, you can just sell out on the run because that man can't throw.
Oh
shit!
Ooh.
Listen, if he could throw even a little bit, Jimmy G wouldn't have started last year.
Yeah, he was raw as hell coming in. That's for sure. Yeah.
And he had he was throwing 21 passes a game in North Dakota State. And even in that, they weren't accurate 20 passes a game.
No,
it was bad.
Yeah.
That stuff, that one always confused me. Because Kyle Shanahan gets a lot of love, right, for being this great coach and this great play caller. But I do question his evaluating skills.
Yeah.
You look at the guys he's drafted, he's not the GM, but come on, he's picking the fucking.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, let's be honest. There's a reason why there's a broadcaster as a GM and not a scout. The Niners draft, especially at the top, have been a little yeah. Speaking of defensive tackles,
team at all.
Javon Kinlaw had a nice little day on Twitter the other day, and he hasn't done anything. So I do really question about what the
Aaron
Niners
Banks
are doing.
2nd round.
Yeah,
Ty Davis Price 3rd round this year.
I guess if I was going to say anything, I would say bet the under with the Niners. I think they're bound to collapse. That's not a team that I feel super high on. Now that Jimmy Garoppolo's not good, he's okay, but the rest of that roster, is not a. It's Kyle Shanahan does a great job coaching, play calling, which makes this team much better than it actually is. But how far does that go? Right? Yeah. If Debo leaves,
that's
they might,
one,
right? Because if Debo leaves, and George Kittle can't also pass the ball to himself, right?
Right.
And it could be a serious problem in San Francisco, especially with that division being as good as it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. You haven't released them yet, but where would you? You have to give me the exact one because that would be spoiling. Like a range of where you would have.
I think they're in a tier 2, of not Super Bowl favorites, but Super Bowl contenders is where I put them. I'm a little higher on them than you. I have a lot of faith in Shanahan as a play caller, not as an evaluator. I do think Lance will take a step from what we saw at North Dakota State.
So from ball boy to backup.
And defensively, they're nasty, man. They're a very nasty defense, and I like the Charvarius Ward addition, a guy that has really graded out poorly per PFF, but every single time I've thrown on Chiefs all 22, he's like locking down top receivers, and was really good against Diggs. I thought in the AFC Championship game was outstanding against Devontae Adams when they went up against each other. Just a nice, much needed addition, and that pass rush, they schemed that group up. D'Amico Ryans is going to be a head coach before long. So
I think so.
Yeah.
All right, listen, I like it. And so I want to kind of jump back to recently with the PFF grades, because I've heard you talk about how you do your grading for your roster, where it's, obviously you watch a lot of film, but you're also taking in some analytics. You're taking in how the rest of the league views him, right? Because you could love a dude, but if the man's not getting the snaps, something's wrong, right?
Yeah.
And I do the same thing. Like if I really like a guy and he can't break a starting lineup, I'm probably just too high on the guy. When you're giving him a final grade, Madden grade, how much of it is analytics? How much of it is film? How much of it is how the league sees him?
Yeah, it's hard to kind of answer like what a split would be there, but I kind of have my own perceptions that have built up over this time. It's just kind of like the existing ratings that are in my head, and then I'm constantly updating those. I have my studs and duds every week where I'm reviewing during the season, which, in the race that is the middle of the season, it's hard not to put a PFF. I think the weight of PFF during the season definitely probably is more than it would be, say, this time of year where I have a little bit more time to really visit the all 22 and take more time with it. But
as long as Game Pass is working, of course.
Yeah, Euro Game Pass is where it's at right now.
Do you have a VPN just for Euro Game Pass?
Oh yeah, hell yeah, I do. Are you
kidding me? Is it worth it?
Yes, it's worth it. Yeah, I'll let you know why it's so worth it after this chat.
Right.
But yeah, so I have like this constantly existing basically Madden roster in my head where I'm like, I have these perceptions of guys. And then 2 or 3 times a year, I sit down to kind of reassess that, I suppose, whether I'm doing the fall edit of the Madden roster, which is just a great opportunity for me to revisit these guys, Madden or real life, whatever it may be. The deep dive's another one. And then during the season with the studs and duds, they're kind of the 3 times where I'm taking a look at my perceptions of these players. So yeah, I would just say during the season, it's a lot of, I watch every game on just the condensed games on like Monday, take notes. That'll, create some changes in my mind. And then I'll revisit the PFF grades when I sit down to adjust the ratings during the week. And then when I get to the summer, like this time of year, it's much more team by team where I'm going preparing for these deep dives. I do 2 games of all 22, and I haven't even really looked too much at like PFF grades for this one, but yeah, I try to put a very strong emphasis on what I'm seeing on film, and then I'll tweak based on analytics and PFF grades.
Interesting. So, when you're doing college, do you follow a kind of a same approach where it's film first, then analytics, and then maybe like testing numbers after that, or is it a little bit different because it's college?
Yeah, I have a hard rule for myself when I do college players is that I don't look at anything before I watch them. I want a baseline opinion based on what I saw, and then I'll pull up the PFF grade. I'll read, I'll look into whether it's Coleman or podcasts or whatever, but like all those podcasts dropping like top 10 wide receiver, anyone that's like talking about anybody there, I want to have my own film grade on them before I get any influence. And then I let other things kind of pull me in different directions. And that's I guess one big rule I have with college.
Yeah, I had the same rule, which is I always feel bad because like I love, well, not anymore because the podcast is over. But I used to love Mike and Austin's tailgate podcast.
Yeah.
But like every time I'm in the middle of watching a film, like I don't want to listen to Mike's opinion on this or Austin's opinion on this. Like I wanted to see it first before I hear about it. Now I was on a podcast a little after the draft talking about draft grades, and I did say that for draft when it comes to players, I do change grades post draft because I am a firm believer of no matter how much I like a guy or how much analytics likes a guy, where he goes is almost as important, if not more important, than how good of a player he actually is. Right? Like I'll use Sam Howell for an example. I like Sam Howell. I thought he could be a solid player. This is already a pretty weak quarterback class anyway. And I was like, oh no, maybe like he kind of fits in that group of like maybe being like a an eventual starter or like a high quality backup. He goes 5th round. His opportunity to get that role is now severely diminished.
Mm-hmm.
So that grade has to be adjusted. Doesn't mean I drop him from where I am as like no that fringe little player to like absolute garbage, but it does have to be adjusted. Do you do the same for your post draft? Because obviously, where you have to then make into a Madden roster, and a guy that you think was a first round guy goes in the 5th round,
Yeah,
you're not going to make him an 80, right? Like, how does that go?
Yeah, it's definitely kind of getting pulled in both directions with it. There's definitely going to be a situation like I'm still going to be higher on that player relative to the other 5th rounders. But yeah, I mean, you have to. It goes back to what you said about snap counts earlier. Like you have to take every bit of information you have and constantly be re-upping your opinion on guys. And when a guy goes in the 5th round and 32 teams pass on a guy 4+ times, it's like, obviously you still like what you saw, but there's something there that you don't know. And you have to let that information in and not be too stubborn about it. And yeah.
I think that's the whole key to evaluation, right? Is not being stubborn.
Mm-hmm.
Just admitting when you're wrong. And listen, there's sometimes you have to kind of dig your feet in, but like just understand that you don't know everything and that evaluation is not a guaranteed process. So even when you look at like Eric Eager's evaluations, it's a range for these guys. It's like it's a bell curve. So it's not like an exact science. Which I kind of hate saying that because usually people that are stupid use that phrase. Like, I was not an exact science. Like, you don't know how to spell that word. Fuck up. So, but it is like you just have to understand like you don't know everything and just take the new information as you get it. It seems like people are so afraid of new information that they'll have their initial opinion and then that's it. And it's not just fans. I think it also goes to analysts and broadcasters. Which is why we kind of fall into these traps of like some of the worst rankings I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
That get released. That'll be released in like a month and a half. And you're like, how the hell is this guy ranked? Especially with quarterback rankings, man. Like that stuff is crazy. And then you also then look at like we had this conversation about why are these 1st round players getting that burn out fast, continue to get love. It's like these GMs had their initial opinion of this guy. And even though there's 7 more years now of tape, they're like, oh, well, he was good at Ole Miss, so fuck it.
Yeah, dude. I just did the Falcons deep dive. Tease Tabor is still on an NFL roster.
Don't. Are you serious?
Yes.
As the ball boy?
Like he had starting opportunities for the Bears last year. It was awful. So I go from doing my Bears deep dive at 30, have to watch him on film. I'm like, really? This guy is like diving head first, missing tackles, out of place in coverage. And then I go to my next deep dive, and there he is listed on the safety depth chart for the Falcons. I'm like, even a second round pedigree gets you that far.
Question: How do you speed up your film enough to watch Tease Tabor, considering he's always running in slow motion? Is that what you get in Euro Game Pass? You can actually see
it's a bonus feature.
The Tease Tabor meter, it actually speeds him up to make it seem like he's part of the game.
That's right.
Oh man, that's so let's Madden announced their cover athlete was Coach Madden for this year, which is honestly he's been the cover guy for
no brainer
for the beginning part. No brainer. Do you think that the days of the cover athlete are dead? Because back in the day when we were kids, we had to physically go to a store. There was at a time competing brands for all different sports, and who was on the cover when you're a kid, it was like a big deal. It's like, oh, I know this dude. I'll pick up this game. I'll know this dude. I'll see this. Now with everything being digital and essentially one company owning the rights to of every video game across one sport, does it matter anymore, or is it kind of like a gimmick at this point?
That's a good. I agree with that take. I mean, I've stopped caring, but that's probably just because they've had stupid Tom Brady on the cover for like 3 straight years.
Well, to be fair, they keep thinking every year is gonna be the last year, so I get it.
Yeah, I mean, I would. They've now had a bunch of years where they put like multiple players on the front, and yeah, I think it's definitely not what it used to be. I agree with that. I mean,
like I like, and even like now, moving on from Madden, like like baseball games are there even multiple baseball games anymore? This is one now, right? Like there really isn't many sports where there's multiple games, right? Like, does NBA have a second game, or did NBA Live die?
EA came in with NBA for a couple years, but I think it died again.
Right. So like, consider that none of the major sports have any competition. Like I guess even if they did have competition, I still don't think it would matter, right? Because you're just going online now. You're download off of the digital store. You have to search for it, right? Back in the day, you would just walk up and down the aisles, like back when we were Blockbuster kids, and like, oh yeah, grab this.
Yeah.
Now you have to know exactly what you're looking for to find it.
I think where it's different now is the social media aspect of it.
That's true.
Yeah. Where you're trying to build hype for the game surrounding who's going to be the cover athlete. That might be where the impact is.
I guess it makes sense. And yeah, like, at the same time though, like, if you're just continuing to give the game away for free, what's it really matter? Because that game is. But real quick on that, and then I'll let you go because I've already held you for way longer than I said I'd hold you for.
It's all good.
They made some improvements with the scouting last year. I know Swami was a part of that. Now he's gone, right? He left.
Yeah.
So we're going back to obviously the way it was before. Probably we're going to go back to Madden 2013. I like what they did. I thought it was a cool concept. It really wasn't executed that well.
Yeah.
In terms of listen, either I'm the worst Madden player, which I've been playing for 20 years, so I really hope that I've gotten a little good over my time playing the game. It just seems like they try to make scouting harder than it actually is, or more convoluted than it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
If you had to create a scouting aspect of for Madden, like how would you do it?
I've thought about like how would I do this differently, and it is hard because you're trying to balance, like, well, you don't want to overwhelm, like you don't want too much there, but you definitely don't want it to be as simple as it was before this new system where you press 3 buttons and you know everything you need to. I like the kind of idea of an automated process where you have a staff that goes and does the work for you. You check in on it 3 or 4 times a year. So I actually wouldn't say I would change what they ended up doing too much. You just need to give you more information. Like,
yeah.
And I know I don't know what I can say because Swami told me some stuff, but like they have made some additions that people will like for next year's Madden where they're giving you more. Cause you could like not even know what, like a pass rusher, you might not know if they're good at either speed rush or power rush. Like you will know something. You'll at least know a range of like, roughly, can this guy do this, or is that not his game? So that's definitely a big change that's needed. Is you have a full staff of scouts working on these players year round. Like you will have at least an idea of every trait on all these players. So that's a huge change that's needed. But actually in general, I just think they needed some tweaks, not like a complete tear it down and try again type of deal.
No, I agree. I don't think it's like that. But it's not like days of before when it was like, this is awful. But it seemed like they like limiting the number of like personal visits, like 3, and like, so you're looking at these 3 players. Like I'm like, these 3 players, like
You get 30 in real life.
Is it just a scouting assistant? Is it like who's working in this department?
Yeah.
Well, it's only 3 players. Like, so to me, the gold standard was always head coach 09, which because you couldn't get everybody, which is true, right? You can't get everybody. You have to allocate resources in different places. But by the time you were done, you kind of had like a 70% understanding of every player, and then the ones you really cared about, you had a very good understanding about.
Yeah.
I felt sometimes when I'm in Madden, I'm in the 4th round. I'm like,
you're flying blind.
Who the fuck is this guy? Like,
yeah.
All it says is he's got D toughness, and I get like the same blurb that's every linebacker. I'm like, great. I can't wait for me to draft this guy and Marcus tell me he sucks. Like this is gonna be great. So like, I do hope that they continue to build on it. And I did like what they did with the weekly game plan. It made it a little more interesting. But I still think there's like, it still gets kind of like monotonous and kind of boring after a while. Like I do miss I know it's like, no, it's kind of mini game-ish, but I do miss the days of like playing like a mini game, a training game. Like that was just fun. Like it made it fun. It also allowed you kind of like to get to know the players a bit without having to sit through a game, which is nice. Cause like how often do you really want to play with your 3rd string players like in Madden? So I don't know. So outside of this guy, is there anything else you would like them to add to make this feature better? And besides like, besides like changing like the trade AI, which has been better over the years, but it's still significantly poor.
Yeah.
Or like the free, or obviously the big one, dumping fucking defensive end outside linebacker and just adding edge already. Like that would be important. But outside of like that stuff, is there anything you think they could add to really make this game better in 1 year?
For me, it's a free agency system, like in the off season, that is just new. Like I want to see, also an upgrade to like the rollover cap, compensatory picks. They did eventually bring 5th-year options back because it was broken, but it's like the real team building aspects.
Yeah, be able to restructure to move to not just have it as a single. It's every contract is backloaded in Madden, which doesn't make any sense. Like because that wasn't always the way. It was like 2011. You can structure your contract properly.
Right
now, it's like it's just this is it, and that's the way it is. So
I void years, like all this stuff that's happening right in front of our face every single day is just, you can't even think about it. So for me, that's a huge thing. Is, I mean, you talk now to like NFL GMs and they'll say, the game's changed a little bit. Like scouting as a GM is still important, obviously, but having an understanding of the cap and like being able to like manipulate the cap and put a like big team together under all these rules and all the loopholes and stuff, like it's huge right now. It's absolutely huge. So
look at the Rams, man.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing, right? Is the Rams are able to manipulate the cap to put together a phenomenal team, and like scouting was still important. The Rams did a good job with their day 2 scouting, but like it was driven by free agent and trade acquisitions. That team. So I'm with you. So I agree. I don't know why head coach 09 is like just living my mind rent free. But like that free agent system was great. When you had you just be the bidding system, which was fun and not kind of boring. But what do you got coming up? I know you're in the middle of the deep dives right now. I think you just did the Falcons at 27.
29.
So when is 28 releasing?
They're gonna be on a weekly basis now as I head to Europe here next week. But yeah, we got the deep dive series on my YouTube. It's That Franchise Guy on YouTube. Diving in, seems to be getting longer every week. The Falcons was an hour and 22 minutes, just me talking. We've had some great guests on. We had Brett Coleman. We had the Bears Over Beers guys come on for the Bears episode. So yeah, just diving in, taking a look player by player, talking about coach and scheme a lot more this year, which has been a fun addition. And we're counting down to number 1. So coming up is going to be our number 28 team, and it's all the mystery of who's next. So
are the Giants 1?
No.
Oh God, don't fuck. All right, man. That's fine, I guess. I will say I don't mind listening to long podcasts, but since the Giants have sucked, it's been hard listening to a Giants podcast for more than 10 minutes.
Fair.
Dude, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been great.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt.
Hey, this is Matt Stopsky from Up and Smoke Football Podcast. Thanks so much for checking out the video. If you could, like, share, subscribe, the whole number. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at mstopsky. On Instagram, it's at mstopsky75. And on TikTok, at mstopsky. I'll be doing videos every week. So if there's a player or a team you want me to go into, leave it in the comments below. See you guys next week.